Hello, friends. My name is Mike Thompson, and welcome to Finding Good. This is the podcast where we explore the stories of remarkable individuals through the lens of my personal story. I live by three tenets every single day. I try to be positively selfish, I surround myself with good people, and I leave the world better than I found it as often as I can. Today's episode is a prologue, if you will, to the Finding Good mentality. My friend JB Hager was also my producer. He's going to be interviewing me today to shed light on my personal story and explore how I've implemented the Finding Good way of life in my own. I'm so excited to be with you. If you're visiting just for the first time, today's episode is going to share a little bit about me, my personal victory over cancer, enduring years of addiction to pain medications, and an eventual and improbable return to life. I can't wait to get started. Hello, friends, and welcome to the Finding Good podcast. Here we dive deep into conversations with remarkable people who have found success in life despite all of life's myriad challenges and found good on the other side. Based on three tenets defined in my best-selling memoir, Finding Good, these individuals have been positively selfish, surrounded themselves with good people, and more than anything, done their part to make this world a better place. My name is Mike Thompson, and this is Finding Good.
All right, here we go. Now I get to kind of turn the tables on you. I'm JB Hager, by the way, as he said, and I'm producing this show for Mike. Happy to be working with Mike on Finding Good, but I think it's very important for for the listeners to understand context of who you are, how you got here, and then our relationship too, which we can fill people in on that.
30 years.
Yeah. And so we'll kind of go back. It's very, very important. I hate long bios at the beginning of a podcast, but yours is critical, right? Because if anyone bumped into you on a run or a bike ride or something like that, a swim, and saw you, aside from some scarring, they would never know that this was a man or a young boy who was very, very sick. You just wouldn't know because you go, this guy's a badass athlete with a great attitude.
Thanks for that.
And very positive and all of that. So let's go back a bit to your cancer story as a kid. And we're not going to spend a ton of time on this because I think it's going to bleed into all these episodes in the future, different stories from that time. So we won't do too much of it now, but people do need to know the context. So when were you were growing up in Austin, and when were you first sick? What happened?
It came out of nowhere. I was 10 years old. This was September of 1995. I was a rambunctious, active, athletic kid, lived a completely normal life up to that point.
Probably playing baseball, soccer, everything?
Yeah, soccer in the fall, baseball in the spring. So I was right in the heart of soccer season. I was a perennial all-star, always made high marks. I was a leading scorer, a leading hitter in baseball, and either a goalie who stopped every single shot or in midfield. And I was the leading scorer. And I was in the heart of soccer season that year, and I started getting these flu-like symptoms. And I was rarely sick as a kid. And after weeks of it not dissipating and, many trips to the doctor, is it strep? Is it the flu? What's going on here? They took some blood work and found out that it was leukemia. And that was a shock to our family. It was Friday the 13th, October of 95, that after being admitted the night before on that Thursday, doctors came in the next morning and said, so he's got acute myelogenic leukemia, M4EO, which was a specific strain of the disease. And it was right out of the gate, chemotherapy. He's going to die from this if we don't start now. And so for the next 5 months until February of 96, I did not leave the hospital. And from that point on, my life changed. And the majority of my life now, even at 39, was lived in or under the spell of cancer or subsequent drugs and side effects.
Yeah, we're going to go backwards and forwards a lot because your story does go back and forwards. You've had, 4 bouts with cancer? So starting at age 10, and then we'll jump ahead. When were you cancer-free?
Well, technically, yeah. So 4 cancers, meaning 3 battles with leukemia. The first induction chemotherapy round, we thought solved it, went into remission pretty quick. And then relapsed 3 months later. Then it was bone marrow transplant number 1, relapsed again, bone marrow transplant number 2. And then, as we'll probably talk about, the tumor that I developed in my jaw was caused by radiation from my first bone marrow transplant. So, side effect of the treatment that I was getting. And that metastasized very quickly and could have easily spread to my brain, my lungs, all these different body parts. But when you're talking about blood cancers like leukemia, lymphoma, there's typically a 5-year cure rate or success rate in terms of what you want to see post-treatment. So you're in remission for 5 years, and then you're considered cured after that. And so for me, that would have been 2003 from the leukemia. My second bone marrow transplant was in January of 1998. With the tumor, it being localized to my jaw, as soon as they removed it, I was considered cancer-free there when they got a big enough margin at MD Anderson in March of 2000. So despite, having endured close to 90 surgeries, the 2 bone marrow transplants.
Wait, you can't just gloss over that, Mike. 90 surgeries. Mm-hmm. I've had 2 in my life, all right? And they were not life-threatening.
Yeah. That's
hard to fathom. Like, that's unbelievable. And you talk about, you just gloss over it because I know how you are. You move on in life, but this is important to your story. That when you had that tumor removed, they had to reconstruct your jaw.
Yes.
from your femur, right?
The fibula from my left leg.
Fibula.
Part of the femur was an option, but it was just too big of a bone, too big for what we wanted to do. And they discovered that they could either use a rib, part of my hip, or the fibula. And my mom and her all of her wisdom decided the fibula would be best, even though it was 100% going to challenge my athleticism and probably prevent me from returning to sports.
That's what's interesting about that. When you make this decision to take part of your leg and reconstruct your jaw, they probably told you, he's not going to be able to run. Maybe even was walking a consideration?
I distinctly
there were a lot
remember,
of risks.
Yeah, there were, absolutely. And I distinctly remember the doctor saying he probably won't be able to run again and walking will be painful. Certainly for the first, few months, years after the reconstruction, removing the fibula, removing the entirety of my lower mandible from just under my chin to below my right ear, and then, reconstructing it with the fibula. I still have a metal plate that looks like a bike chain, kind of fitting because I love cycling. But yeah, reconciling, okay, I know I still want to be alive, but part of the reason why I loved life so much was sports. I've always been an athlete. I've always loved sports, been very competitive. You can ask my wife, Kendall. I get competitive with card games as much as team sports. But
are you a tip over the game and storm out guy?
Yes, absolutely. When we play trouble with my in-laws and her, if I get knocked out, I'm like, that's it, I'm done. I don't even want to see you people for the next few hours. But that competitive spirit is also, I think, what got me through it. The doctors always said that my strong heart was a big factor in my recovery and enduring treatment. And so that was comforting, but knowing that I wouldn't be able to return to sports at a high level was discomforting. And so the first rounds of surgeries that I had, there were, the term two-a-days for Texas high school football, 2-a-day practices, one morning, one afternoon. I had 2-a-day surgeries for about 2 weeks when I developed a fungal infection in my nose. So I actually don't have sinuses, septum. There's this big cavern here. I can put my fingers up each nostril and touch my fingers together, which if you're going on, David Letterman used to have stupid human tricks. I could put a spaghetti noodle up one, out the other, and floss.
Oh my God.
It makes for some comic relief for sure. But, they excavated my entire nasal cavity. I had aspergillus, second deadliest fungal infection in the world, set in when my counts were down during that first bout with leukemia. So, all the surgery after surgery, from the maintenance type stuff of putting in catheters to the nasal surgeries to then later on down the road having, the reconstruction and then tissue taken out and then infections cleaned, they just started piling up. I got so familiar with what type of anesthesia I was getting, what the recovery process was like. But there were those times when I was put under and I was, in a medically induced coma for 3 or 4 days because the pain was so severe. And I distinctly recall in my subconscious thinking like, this is it. I'm dead. I'm in this limbo. I'm in this purgatory. Life is over. And then I'd wake up and I certainly wished I was dead. because the pain was so intense.
Everyone should read the book and Finding Good. And that was one of the most gut-wrenching parts I read in the whole book was you told your mom, let me die.
I wrote it down. So hopefully listeners will take a chance and read the book. I really poured my heart and soul into it. But the reason why I led with the tumor and the reconstruction was because of how visceral an experience it was. And I had made it through the reconstruction, and it was about a week and a half after the big surgery that I started smelling this, kind of musty smell coming from my jaw. Now, to give you the picture, 14 years old, exact same size as I am right now. I was a short kid, grew normally up until 10, and then I just stayed the same height. So 5'3" kid, 14 years old. I'm laying in a hospital bed. I have a scar right here from where they took the skin graft to replace the tissue on my left leg. My left leg is up in a sling to lower the swelling from where they took the fibula. There's a big piece of tissue that they took from my leg that is now my gum. So to this day, I still grow hair in my mouth. I grow leg hair in my mouth. My jaw was wired shut. I had a feeding tube going up my nose, down into my stomach for nutrition. I had a drain coming out of my neck here, a drain coming out of my left leg, a catheter in my cash and prizes area so that I could go to the bathroom, and then a catheter in my chest for all my intravenous medicines. Completely immobile, wasn't really allowed to like touch my face or anything, even though it was just excruciating. And in order to rid my jaw of the infection that had set in 2 weeks after the procedure, they needed to go in and do another surgery right away. But they didn't want to fully anesthetize me because they were worried that my heart rate would get too low. So they opted for sedation. So I had a cocktail of like Demerol, morphine, and Versed, and they, wheeled me back into the operating room. I remember going to sleep, and I woke up pretty quick. Now, the goal of that surgery was to not only remove the infection and a few more teeth on the lower part of my jaw, but to also put in a feeding tube directly into my stomach. The one that was going up into my nose was so annoying. It was cold, felt like I had a hock a loogie all the time. My throat was sore constantly. So I woke up and I was like, okay, that wasn't too bad. I guess they're finished, but they were only half done. And so I feel them inflating my stomach. And bear in mind, I have all those cords and wires running in and out of my body, but I was also handcuffed to the operating table so that if I did wake up, I didn't interfere with the procedure. They start to inflate my stomach. I'm kind of tossing and turning, trying to let them know that I'm awake so that they don't pierce my stomach while I'm fully alert. And they just proceeded to do it. And as they started inflating my stomach to put the new feeding tube in, I started hyperventilating. I ended up throwing up whatever contents were in my stomach at the time, which was probably just Pedialyte and Ensure. And that liquid came up. In addition to mucus, and I had drainage from the nose feeding tube, clogged my trach. That was the other thing I forgot to say is I had a tracheotomy so I could breathe. So I start vomiting. It clogs up my trach, my only access to breathing. Remember, my jaw is wired shut, and then the liquid starts coming out of my wired shut jaw. In that moment, I reflect on this now, and I'll try not to get emotional, but in that moment, I prayed for God to kill me. I just thought, this is torture. I mean, this is what the CIA does if they want to get answers from someone who's not cooperating. This isn't what a 14-year-old kid should endure. And this was the fourth cancer. This was the 50 or 60th something surgery at that point. And I just remember thinking, I don't want to do this anymore. So they sedate me for the rest of the procedure when they noticed I was awake. And I come to a few days later, and there was this little whiteboard that had the smiley faces on it, from smiling to frowning. And it was to rate your pain scale. And it had my meds on there, it had who my nurse was, and my mom. I went like this because I wanted to write something down, and I just wrote, just let it kill me. And I crossed out all the faces because there was no way that I could express how I felt in that moment. I was lost, and I wanted to die. And my mom, and all of her strength and wisdom, tears streaming down her face, she said, you've got a lot of people rooting for you here, including me. and she pulls out this huge crate of letters, over 700 letters from my classmates at Anderson High School that were all, "Get well, we miss you, keep fighting." And so in that moment, I distinctly remember, yeah, I want to die, but I also kind of want to live too. I just want to live without all this pain. And my mom promised that better times were ahead. And that's kind of where the finding good mentality started way back then.
We're going to jump around a lot, and I don't want to do too much because we're going to touch on these things periodically. But I was on the radio as a radio host doing a morning show in Austin for like 20 years, and we met at some point when you were a kid.
Yep.
And I thought about it a lot when I was reading your book because we had a mutual friend, Kelly Davidson.
Yep.
And she became a celebrity on the radio.
Yeah.
Real fireball. And she's no longer with us.
Correct.
And you're 39.
Yep.
I don't know if she's older or younger, but she would be
a couple years younger than me, but she would be 36.
She'd be 37 today. She's no longer with us.
Mm-hmm.
And so not only are you seeing yourself in this awful position, you're losing the people around you. I can't imagine what that's like, being a young person and going, "Oh, so-and-so just passed." It probably happened a lot. Whether you were here at a hospital or I know you were at Cook's in Fort Worth.
Dozens of times. I mean, Emma Kelly was one, Emma Duke, Billy Rutledge, Ashley Fenton. Seeing my friends who were also cancer fighting heroes to me, we bonded. Our families bonded. My mom and Kelly's mom, Jamie, were really close, and it's hard to not have guilt when you're the remaining one, when you're still living. And I'm positive that none of the parents of our loved ones lost would ever, resent me or my family for, still being alive on the other side of cancer. But at the same time, Emma Duke was 3 years old when she passed away. She would come sit in my hospital bed with me, just the most pure looking Gerber baby you could have ever envisioned. And I remember thinking, okay, in the moments where times are the toughest, I'm still here. My heart's still beating. I still have people rooting for me. How much of a disservice is it to their legacy if I just give up? I'm sure that they would keep fighting on if they had the chance to do that. And so that became motivation for me, at 10, 12, 15 years old, to say, as long as I have a life to live, I'm going to live it intentionally and passionately. And I still have those reminders. And as we all know, cancer's, the most ubiquitous disease, illness that people face. Almost everyone you talk to has a cancer story, whether it's their own survivorship journey or having a family or friend that endured it or passed away from it. And so it's just one of those things that everyone knows can be a horrible experience, but the people around me wouldn't let me give up.
I know it probably feels weird. We're starting out this podcast with a horrific story,
mm-hmm.
But you lived it. It's real, and I hope people will continue to listen to this podcast and get to know it, because you've had. And we'll get more to this in a minute. I want to hear a little bit more about your teenage years, because you wrote the book Finding Good. You're a force to reckon with around town. You're synonymous with running and try, swimming. You're always have a good attitude. You're always helping people. You're first guy to always roll up his sleeves and throw on some gloves and do some work. And so there's a lot that you're going to get from Mike out of this podcast, and we'll get to more of that in a minute. So now you've gone through all these treatments and all this, and then how on earth do you go back to being a normal teenager?
Well, there was nothing normal about it. When I returned to school, I did have the benefit of being the guy that beat it, that came back to life after wanting to die, and so I can remember when I went back to middle school, there was a group of us at Redeemer Lutheran, friends that I knew from basically third grade on, that we were all being rambunctious one time in class when the teacher was out of the room, and the teacher came back into the room and gave all the people that were involved demerits except for me. And I was like, no, give me the merit. Like, I'm not narking on these people. Like, I'm not a rat. I was part of this too. Don't treat me special because I'm the cancer kid. But luckily, I had a homebound teacher that came to my house during the years that I was in treatment, so I didn't fall behind. I had a counselor at Anderson High School, Roz Stevenson, that kept me up in school. And I had to take some catch-up classes instead of playing baseball and soccer throughout high school like I would have. I had to take PE. I had to get my PE credit somehow. So it was abnormal.
Dodgeball and scooter races.
100% dodgeball. Little scooter races
and
around.
For a kid that just wanted to be an athlete, you're like, come on.
I loved it. I mean, like, there were kids in PE that should not have ever, held a hockey stick. But I would, just blow them out of the water, like shooting goals left and right, because it was just what I loved to do. But again, it was a reminder that, hey, I'm still alive. So I love school. I love learning. I'm not in the hospital right now, so I'm going to do whatever I can to make the best out of this. And luckily graduated high school on time, but that also coincided with the healing of my jaw. I didn't have any teeth down here, and so my upper right teeth, kept dropping down. And that the pain that came from that was, more severe than any other side effect I had up to that point. And back then, it was the beginning of the opioid epidemic, when people that made OxyContin and Vicodin were just handing out stuff like that, like candy. So
we've all seen the mini-series now.
Yeah, there's so many, little documentaries now about how they did this. And as a, grad student who studied persuasion and sales while getting my master's, I learned the techniques that these pharma companies would do. And, they would say to doctors who were worried about their patients becoming addicted to drugs, they'd say, no, it's pseudo addiction. They just have a really severe case of pain. It's okay to keep prescribing more because these cases are necessary to keep prescribing these meds. So I'd go to MD Anderson, I'd refill, get 300 Vicodin, 180 gabapentin, 30 Xanax, 30 oxycodone, come home, do it again the next month. And so that's when...
And you're how old now?
17, 18, which transitioned from my mom taking me to me going on my own and having autonomy and getting a driver's license. And I didn't think I was doing anything wrong. At that point, I'm like, I'm just going to see my doctor to get my pain meds because I'm a cancer survivor.
It's what you needed to survive.
Absolutely.
The pain.
But that it went from the normalcy of returning to school to the abnormalcy of I'm a full-blown drug addict. But because it's cancer related and because I'm getting it legally, I'm not. And so it was this like, I don't really want to be living this way, but I don't really know if there's an alternative to it.
All right, let's give me some timeline stuff here because, and again, we'll get more into these in future episodes. I don't want to go too deep here. You're now been through all this treatment. You're now an addict, basically.
Yep.
And then the education part comes later too. Which came first? The figuring out what you wanted to do with your life and getting off all those things and education, or was it the sports stuff too? Because it seems like forever I've known you've been doing triathlons and all of this stuff. But
there was a period
what's the timeline?
From probably 2003, the second half of my senior year in high school, until about 2008, where not a day went by that I didn't take some form of pharmaceutical drugs. And in that time, beginning with dropping out of college my freshman year at Concordia, because I just didn't go to class. If I had the drugs, if I had access to them, I would stay at home and sleep and, just be buzzed all day. If I didn't have the drugs, I would go into withdrawal and the pain would come back very, very quickly. And so I used that as a reason to not go to class and dropped out of school. I was still being active in some ways with high school friends. We'd go play pickup football, soccer, whatever, play sand volleyball. But the deeper that I got into the drug addiction, the less I wanted to do those active things. So gained a lot of weight, started drinking a lot of alcohol, and didn't really fall in with a bad crowd, but I fell into a crowd that wasn't athletically inclined, that didn't live healthy lifestyles. They just, drank and smoke, and by smoke, I mean cigarettes. And it wasn't the life that I pictured for myself, but I was also still alive. So I'm like, this is my life now. I got dealt a bad hand. I had childhood cancer. I'm a drug addict. I can't, at that point, I wasn't calling myself a drug addict. I was a cancer survivor that had chronic pain. And I remember distinctly thinking, I'm going to need to secure a prescription before my future wife and I go on our honeymoon. I'm going to need to make sure I have meds with me if we wake up because my son or daughter has a soccer game. I'm picturing into the future what it's like to rely on drugs for the rest of my life. And in late 2006, 2007, my mom was living with her at the time because I was bouncing from couch to couch, didn't have a full-time job that let me afford an apartment. I always had a roommate and somebody helping me financially. And it wasn't until I returned from a mission trip one weekend that I was still active at Redeemer and my church and doing mission work. And I came back and my mom had discovered this drawer where I kept all of my empty pill bottles. And I did that because we were part of this amazing organization called the Children's Organ Transplant Association, the original CODA, what it stood for. And they reimbursed every single transplant-related expense, which the tumor was caused by the first transplant. So every subsequent procedure, medication, whatever copay it was covered by the funds that were raised through CODA. And so I kept all my receipts and kept all my pill bottles so that I could submit the labels and get reimbursed for all those copays, which, was $10 for every bottle for every month because insurance would cover it. And I had a revolving door of drugs the whole time. And my mom opens this drawer and she sees all these empty Vicodin and Neurontin, gabapentin pill bottles. And she says, "Are you in this much pain?" And I was like, "Yeah, I can't not take these. If I don't take them, I have night sweats. I have feel like I have a seizure coming on. I've got diarrhea and nausea all day long. I've got chills. My jaw hurts worse than ever before." I didn't know that these are the hallmarks of withdrawal and drug addiction and dependency. I just thought this is what it's like being a cancer survivor because the withdrawal symptoms were so similar to what chemo makes you feel like that I was like, I don't want to feel like that ever again. So I'm going to keep popping these pills. And she found those, and behind the scenes, she had figured out that our insurance would cover a trip to rehab. She located a facility just outside of Kerrville. And in May of 2008, she hosted an intervention and sent me to, it's called Starlight Recovery Center in Center Point, Texas. And I spent a month there, learned all about addiction, thought it was going to be a bunch of, crackheads and miscreants and criminals. And I met doctors and lawyers and nurses and cops and firefighters that all had some form of drug dependency or issue coping with what they'd been through.
And as you mentioned, it was the heyday of that abuse
really was,
with painkillers.
Handing them out like candy.
Okay. You come out of rehab. Which came first, the fitness or the education?
Fitness, for sure.
Okay. How did that happen? And then we'll move quickly now because I want to get to the purpose of this podcast, but this is important for the story.
So it was at rehab that I started, playing sand volleyball, shooting the basketball around. They had a little fitness center there, and I just started working out. It was the first time that I had been able to wake up, get dressed, and go do something active without first taking pain medicine. And so that showed me it's possible, right? I did not know that not taking meds to live my life was even a thing. And so after about 2.5, 3 weeks, when my stomach finally started to settle down, they have medications to help you kind of clear out the drugs in your system. I started drinking a ton of water, whereas before I drank pretty much A&W root beer. That's all I drank for years. All I drank was root beer. It's crazy thinking about how unhealthy I was back then. But I started running around that, the little trail there in Center Point. And I remember the last weekend there, my family came out for family weekend, and there was a big volleyball tournament that I hosted. I had 2 teams of 6. They were all Starlight campers, and we had this big, volleyball tournament. And I was like, I love this. I'm active. I've lost a bunch of weight. Get out of rehab, move in with my mom. And one day, that fall, October, I decided, I'm going to go run around Town Lake, this place that I've been coming to. For those of you listening, it's Lady Bird Lake, but it'll always be Town Lake to me.
We're old school Austinites. It's Town Lake
here. And so I was looking for some sort of athletic, gear to wear. And it was a team in training Leukemia and Lymphoma Society t-shirt that I had gotten in 1998 when my dad did El Tour to Tucson, century bike ride after raising, however much money for the organization. And Leukemia and Lymphoma Society did play an integral role in my recovery and getting back to life. So I wanted to give back. I wanted to do something through the organization, but I didn't know if I could run or ride or any of that. So one day I just decided to go run. I put on that team in training shirt. I ran around Town Lake. It was a beautiful fall afternoon. And I thought, I remember them saying I wouldn't be able to run. I remember them saying I wouldn't be able to walk without pain in my leg. And now that I'm free of the drugs, and now that I've got a little bit of fitness foundation built up, I'm going to see how far I can take this. And my best friend, both then and still is, Alex, he was like, I'll help you. I'll run and train with you. We should do the Cap 10K together. Let's live a life of fitness. And he wasn't incredibly out of shape, but he wanted to lose some weight and get fit. And so together we, it was just this new life that I had never lived before, being diagnosed with cancer at age 10. And here I am in my early 20s. And just now I'm living a normal adult life. I still needed to find a full-time job, had no money, but it was 2008. Nobody had any money.
And
so
you could live in Austin without money.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And, so I still kind of bounced around my mom's house, my dad's house. But then, slowly started, got a full-time job at Costco. This is all in the book, by the way. So readers and listeners at home, read the book and you'll get the full story. But yeah, that was the return. The fitness, being active, is what truly brought me back to life.
Again, I'm going to move through some of this fitness stuff quickly and get to the podcast. So you've turned your life around with fitness. Then I'm fast forwarding for the listener out there. Mike is well known. Anyone who rides a bike or runs or swims in Austin knows this guy. He's a real motivator. You even helped my wife and her friends do their first sprint try.
Jack and Adams.
Just because you're a good guy. And you're just one of those people around town that just, as I said earlier, how can I help? What can we do? So now you're a fixture. You're a fixture in the fitness community in Austin. Spent years at the bike shop, and then working with Hi-Fi Productions. So I always see you out there moving barriers before and after the marathon, the 10K, whatever it is. You're that guy. And so you're, again, fitness is your lifestyle, but there was a hole there. Like you said, you're working at Costco. Nothing against Costco, but you decided to go back to school and fix that.
Yeah,
and that has completely changed your life.
I mean, I have more awareness, self-awareness, more wisdom, more of a content worldview, I think, now that I've kind of crossed that off the checklist of getting a degree, getting a master's degree. I'll fast forward through the fitness stuff really quick because I think getting through these milestones in fitness is what prepared me for returning to academia. So, it's 2008, 2009. I do the Century Ride in Lake Tahoe with my bone marrow donor. And now some of my still best friends, Alan and Kristen Benton, Gary Holiday, these are close advisors and supporters of mine that have just been mainstays in my life throughout all these years, dating back to 2009. And if it weren't for them and the way that they made me feel welcome in this new community that I never even knew existed outside of what my dad did in 1998, it kept me coming back and wanting more. And the Century Ride turned into a half Ironman triathlon and then a full Ironman. And then I made it to the Hawaii Ironman, the World Championship in Kona in 2012. 2 years after that, I get the opportunity to go raise money for Livestrong and climb Mount Kilimanjaro in Africa, which was, I listened to Toto growing up, just like everyone did. And, just like the rains down in Africa, being able to do those kind of childhood dream adventures was not lost on me of I should be dead right now for multiple reasons, whether it's cancer, addiction, doing stupid stuff like drinking and driving. All that stuff was in the past. And I remember coming down from the mountain after climbing Kilimanjaro, the group that we went with, I'm still close with a lot of them. My good friend, Dr. Joe Volpe, see him a couple times a week to watch football together. I remember very distinctly coming down from that mountain and saying, I want to dedicate my life to doing good for others. I want to be selfish. I'm going to make decisions that keep me whole. But once I'm done with that, I'm going to do my part to leave the world better than I found it. And in order to kind of synthesize these things, I wanted to learn how to communicate that with the world. I wanted the academic background to say, yes, I have this degree. Not only have I endured what it took to earn a bachelor's degree, but the knowledge that's acquired along with it is reinforcing that. So working at Livestrong in 2017, and I see this little ad pop up that Concordia, the school that I dropped out of, has a online program with real professors. So it wasn't like University of Phoenix. It was an actual curriculum. And I thought, okay, I can do these classes at night, and I can work during the day, so I'm not losing any money. It was at this point that I had met my now wife, Kendall, through relationships that I had at the bike shop with Greg and Linda, my in-laws. And I thought, all right, she's going to support me in this. She's got 6 degrees because she's a psychopath. She's the smartest person in the world. And she's finishing her doctorate, and I'm coming home watching SportsCenter. Like, there's a lopsided relationship here.
If you hadn't dedicated to changing your life, she would have literally been supporting you.
She still does in many ways. But she, having her kind of vote of confidence of like, yeah, I can return to school and do this. And so, went back to Concordia, kind of righted that wrong of like, having abandoned stuff. And then all of a sudden, I am, finishing Concordia University right during when COVID hit 2020. I get laid off from the job that I was working at, just like 1,200 other people during that time. And then I look at this degree, this master's degree in communication at Texas State, which is where my wife went. It's where Alex, my best friend, went. My good friend Julie Fisher went. So I'm like, all this is just so perfect. Texas State University, master's in communication. I never thought I'd have a degree to my name in general. And now I have the opportunity to pursue a master's degree. And I focused on, obviously a master's in communication, but I focused on rhetoric. I focused on persuasion so that I could, whether it was write a book, whether it start a podcast, I wanted to convey the message that life is short and it's hard, but it's always worth fighting for. And that brings us here today.
Yeah. I know that's a heavy lift for everyone to hear this story, but it's so critical. And then you jump ahead and, I had reconnected with you. We were both sitting in on an advisor meeting for a nonprofit. Yep. And everyone's going around the room talking, giving their input. Mike was last. Mike chimes in and it was literally like the most perfect, profound, be-all, end-all answers to the problems. Literally a mic drop. And I just remember going, forgive me on the language, holy shit, this guy is smart as hell. I was blown away. That wasn't that long ago. That was maybe 2 years ago.
Yeah.
And then you
Operation
go on.
Get Out. Yeah.
Yeah, I was just really impressed. I'm like, this guy's got a smart marketing brain. Which maybe in the future we talk about the challenges you overcome with all the treatment you've been through. Yep. Like you'd think you would have, your brain's working pretty darn good for what you've been through. Let's jump ahead. You decide after the Kilimanjaro thing that probably also spawned, I need to write a book. I need to tell this story. You've lived a very unnatural, abnormal, and amazing, miraculous life in a weird way. I'm sure at times it doesn't feel that way. You'd have rather just been a regular dude.
Normal.
But, it's led you down this amazing path to give back. So you do the book, Finding Good. Tell us about that.
I needed a place where the story lived. And it's just like we're talking about here. I think we wanted to have this introductory prologue, if you will, be like 30 minutes. And I think we're well over that already now. There's just so much.
You and I can go 30 minutes.
But it's all important. The having credibility in these areas of being a cancer survivor, being a drug addict, when so many people are affected by the same challenges and myriad other challenges. My wife and I have a very unique story of she was married before our relationship, and sadly her husband passed away. He had type 1 diabetes, and I met her in the hardest part of that grief and learning life is precious and it's short, and we're not guaranteed. And Dylan remains and will always be a big part of our life because we are both lucky to share our love of Kindle together. But we have this unique outlook on life of being intentional and living with urgency. And I needed to have the story live somewhere because there's no way to elevator pitch my story. There's no way to elevator pitch Finding Good. People need to understand the entirety of it. And frankly, I just got tired of telling the whole story. In 1995, I was diagnosed with it. But I'm 39 now. And the majority of my life still at age 39 has resided in my cancer story. It affected everything from age 10 until now. Last night, we're here in late December 2024. And my wife woke up this morning and she said, you had a rough night last night. And I said, how'd you know? And she was like, because you were moaning all night and I woke up and you were grabbing your jaw like this while you were asleep. So I still deal with chronic pain. I'm deaf. I wear hearing aids because chemo damaged my hearing. My lung capacity is diminished by about 30%. I'm shorter in stature than I should be. I've got a fibula-less leg.
But you got great power to weight ratio. I'll
really
give you that.
And a strong heart. Got a big engine in that thing, Ferrari engine in a Miata body. But there's all these things that I am so grateful for. And, whenever I see, influencers and thought leaders on viral podcast clips, and this isn't to diminish their story. Everyone has good stories, but it's always these superficial problems that they've overcome. I was working in tech, I was working in finance, all these hours, and I just started doing cocaine to stay up at night, and I got addicted to drugs, and now I'm back and running marathons. It's like, that's an incredible story.
I left Wall Street. Oh, boo-hoo.
Yeah. Oh, sorry. You got $15 million in the bank, and
right.
Not to say that what they endured was not challenging, but it was self-induced. Like for people like Emma, who's no longer here, Kelly Davidson, like if I hear anybody complain about how hard life is in this era when there's never been an easier way to acquire knowledge, technology has made everything so convenient. And I understand, through social media and through the way the world works now, we invite people into our lives in myriad ways. And we're constantly letting people judge us. And then we complain about people are leaving comments and I'm not getting enough likes. And it's like these socially driven beings, create these spaces. That also means we can control who we let into our lives. So I wanted to invite people in from the lens of this is what I've been through as a cancer survivor, as an addict, as a return to life athlete. And I want to share these tenets that I grew up, in a very religious environment, Church of Christ. And then I went down the Lutheran pathway. Now I consider myself more spiritual than religious. I have my own views of God, my own views of the afterlife, which the closest to me know how I feel. But I wanted Finding Good to be approachable regardless of what your background is, regardless of what your age, gender, religion, where you're from. The tenets of Finding Good that I've identified in the book and that will be shared throughout this podcast with all of my guests. I believe that if you learn to be positively selfish, right, take care of you before you take care of others, then you surround yourself with good people. People that lift you up. We talked about this before, people that can give you opposition research, but also distancing yourself from people that take value from your life. And then using those first two tenets to do your part to make the world a better place. For me, I want to do those things every day. There's that power of three coming back again. You and I have talked about Jim Valvano, Coach Jimmy V, when he accepted his Arthur Ashe Courage Award when he was going through cancer. He said,
it's a must watch on YouTube.
It really is. Google Jimmy V acceptance speech of the ESPYs. But he said, in that, kind of New York draw, he's like, every day I try to do three things. I try to laugh, spend some time laughing with others, cry, be moved to tears, whether they're happy tears or sad tears, and think. spend some time in thought. You have our buddy McConaughey, Matthew, talking about the 3 things he does every day. He has something to look up to, he has something to look forward to, and he's chasing someone. And for him, he's chasing himself 10 years down the road. For me, the power of 3, the tenets of finding good are, first and foremost, be positively selfish. Second, surround yourself with good people. And third, do your part to leave the world better than you found it. And I can think of no other way of life to live because it's worked so much for me. It's helped me endure all these things, whether it's the cancer, whether it's the addiction, whether it's, the Ironman World Championship, whether it's summiting the tallest freestanding mountain in the world, whether it's earning a master's degree with chemo brain and ADD, squirrel, enduring all these things, I've been able to do that because I'm positively selfish, because I surround myself with good people, and every day I try and do my part to make the world better.
Well, I'd encourage anyone to pick up the book. It's the first book I read in a day in a long time.
I appreciate that.
I couldn't put it down. So now, fast forward, you've got the book out. You're living this life. You want to help people. You want to spread your positive vibes and message. And you're the last person on earth that doesn't have a podcast.
Everyone has a podcast except you. It's an actual book that I'm reading right now.
And I get the sense that it's a bit of a love-hate thing for you, because along with the podcast, there comes a lot of talking where you probably prefer to listen more, although you're a great teacher. You also do all the necessary elements that come with it, the social posts, the putting yourself out there. These are clips of me again and again and again. Yep. Tell me, am I wrong? Are you struggling with that a little bit?
Big time.
Okay.
Because I imagine if you're watching or listening to this right now, you're probably doing so through your smartphone. There's a strong likelihood. And the thing is, I don't want you to be listening to this or watching this on your smartphone. If you are, I hope it's because you're on a walk somewhere, or you're, multitasking by cleaning your house, or just doing something productive other than just sitting and looking at your phone. Because we have this whole great big world out there full of amazing adventures and remarkable places to see and amazing people to spend time with. And I get so overwhelmed with frustration, especially with young people. I had the privilege of teaching 2 years at Texas State while getting my master's, and half of my students wanted to be an influencer or a content creator, which is great, but it's only perpetuating the need to be glued to our devices all the time. And now whenever I'm at an airport or whenever I'm in line somewhere, just all these people are just zombies almost. And so yes, I know that it is the currency of which we now exchange is likes and shares and comments. And I know that for this podcast to be successful, that I'm going to have to leverage a lot of those tools and resources. But I also want to encourage people to, in the realm of being positively selfish, to spend time away from your phone and just focus on people or pets or just being outside for a few minutes every day. I guarantee you there's scientific studies that show that visually seeing green things, living things outside create a better mental health status for yourself. Mm-hmm. Breathing fresh air is vital in maintaining quality of life.
I just saw a graph. I meant to send it to you because I thought of you, and it, in a nutshell, it was showing what people's prioritized their time 20 years ago. Yep. Friends was number 1.
Yep.
Family was number 2. Work number 3, and it goes on and on and on. Maybe church.
I saw that. It's shifted now.
And it shifted to where being online, doubled, way surpassed even friends. Frightening. You already saw that, but to your point.
So it's a struggle for me, especially when I see, friends of mine that are influencers, and when I see them online, they're recording things and it's staged. Like nobody has a camera on them all the time.
Right.
Unless you're Sandy from Along Came Polly and you're shooting your own True Hollywood story, you're not going to have cameras with you all the time.
Right.
And so
we don't even know what's real anymore.
No.
But
everything is staged. Mm-hmm. There's so many things that are they're inauthentic. They're not genuine. And one of the concepts that I learned about in grad school from John Baudrillard was this thing called the simulacra. And it's the concept, the idea that, and I'll get into this in a much later boring episode, but essentially it shows that people are okay with not having the actual experience and just living it through someone else's eyes. Or if you go to Las Vegas and you see the mini Eiffel Tower there, that's good enough. You don't need to go to Paris and see it. And so people are becoming more accustomed to living through others' experiences. And that's why these travel influencers and these blogs are so popular, is because people can see, oh, those are the Maldives, or oh, that's Singapore, or oh, that's the Arctic Circle. They don't have to go experience those things themselves. I'm not that way. I want to go. I want to touch the water. I want to feel the sand. I want to breathe the air on the mountain and dive into the cold waters of Cabo de Roca in Portugal, or someplace off South America. And for me, that is a reminder that I'm still alive.
One of the goals with this podcast, and one of the things we talked about, because it's rampant in podcast world, where you get two like-minded people get on and tell each other how great they are.
Yep.
And then break, you go home and do it again with somebody else the next day. Oh, you come on my podcast. And it's, in my opinion, and I think you feel the same way, it's not being appreciative of my time as a listener. And I think one of the goals with this podcast is to be very conscious of people's time and what they get out of it, and to get away from this episode, which is the Mikey story, right? And get into other people's stories and not make it about you. Yep. So on the heels of that, what can people expect if you're just, I just launched a podcast. What's it going to be like? Go ahead.
Every episode is going to feature somebody who I feel has become successful in their own industry, their own space. Entrepreneurs, tech founders, athletes, artists, authors, business owners, nonprofit organizers, all different walks of life. And I try to identify how they implement the 3 tenets in their own. Whether they knew it or not, I believe that to be successful, you need to follow those 3 tenets. And to find success, if you do those things that way in order, it's a sustainable form of success. And so whether it's, my friend Allison, who's not only works in tech, but she's a startup founder, we're going to explore how she balances her professional life with being an athlete and also being a lifelong academic, getting a master's degree. If we're talking about my friend Marshall, who's a former NFL lineman, exploring how he transitioned from arguably the most popular sport in the world outside of European football, but transitioning from being a professional NFL football player to becoming a real estate entrepreneur or an investor. And so every space, every industry will be represented in there. And the goal is to identify how those 3 tenets have helped that person find success in life. And I don't want it to be inauthentic. I want it to be genuine, and I want to have tough conversations. I want to know, when are the times that you wanted to give up? Who are the surround yourself with good people, but who are the bad people you've had to distance yourself from? You try to leave the world a better place, but sometimes things don't go that well. Sometimes you just need to take a step back and not do anything in the world. So having those real conversations of people that are objectively successful in their life, identifying the tenets of finding good within their own story, and then having the listener or the viewer take practical advice and knowledge and wisdom so that they can implement it in their own lives.
And I think you're going to do some check-ins with your wife from time to time.
That's the goal.
Which I heavily encourage because, again, read the book, Finding Good. You both have overcome a lot of tragedy. And it's a pretty cool story. So
she has a very finite social gas tank. She's also a little bit more of a private person than I am. We complement each other so well. She's my best friend in the world. But it will take some persuading to get her on screen, on camera. But her story and our story together is a compelling one. And I do think people, I've been told this, inundated with messages of appreciation after reading the story, to know that, look, nobody's life is perfect, and ours isn't at all. But we love each other, and through that love, we support each other no matter what is happening. That's what real, true love is.
Yeah, and I don't think they're all going to be interviews. So you may do some check-ins with your wife. Yep. You may check in with some friends and
Absolutely.
Just
little updates.
Just on an isolated topic. Just check in on that if there's a big takeaway. So it won't always be a heavy lift investment. Right. In fact, we sat down and said, let's talk for 30 minutes, but I knew that would be impossible.
2 hours now.
I know. I'm encouraging people to give this podcast a chance. Give it 3-4 episodes. I think you'll fall in love with it. I'm going to ask you one thing before we part. I've got to ask you about your love of tacos. You can't be around Mike and you aren't talking about eating within 30 minutes. You can't function unless there's tacos nearby.
Yes.
And you gave me the greatest answer to it. I go, what is you just want, like, your life revolves around eating. And you had the most unbelievable answer is that you couldn't for 2 years. And I was like, oh my God. Yeah. So tell everybody that story real quick.
Well,
before
first,
we part.
The origin of the tacos is being born and raised in Austin. And I don't want to start an online debate. For those of you from San Antonio, we both have good tacos. So let's just end it there. But I had a next door neighbor growing up, Danny and Maria Gonzalez were from Mexico. And they had always, fresh tamales around the holidays, fresh tortillas every single weekend. So I'd get stuff from them. Absolutely adored living next door. Growing up in Austin, the mainstay was Taco Cabana. It's embarrassing to say, but they had great breakfast tacos. They probably still do.
This was pre-Taco Deli, pre-Torchy's.
Pre all the offerings that we have today. Pre-Veracruz. Shout out to Reina and Maritza at Veracruz, my favorite taco in the world. The migas on corn, both salsas, because I like to party. But the taco love just was associated with my love of food. And twice, like you said, for almost 2 years, I couldn't eat. During my first bone marrow transplant, I lost my sense of taste. I could still smell, which is so cruel because I could smell whatever my mom was eating, but as soon as I would try to eat it, it tasted like ash in my mouth. So it's like, imagine being able to smell the most delectable, delicious food ever, putting it in your mouth and having it taste like ash. Just horrible experience. And that lasted for a few months. And then when my jaw was wired shut, for the better part of the year, I couldn't chew solid food. And so it was, Pedialyte, Ensure. It transitioned into things like applesauce and pudding, two things of which I cannot eat ever again, applesauce and pudding. They make me want to gag because I took a lot of crushed up medications in that. Yeah. But when your ability to eat is taken away from you, food has a different meaning from that point forward. And since then, because I'm known as Taco Mike in a bunch of different spaces, and because, and by the way, the tacos are just the perfect it's a meal all in its own handheld envelope. Like, you can't beat it. But for me, food is love. And I've seen and witnessed friends. There's also going to be a few chefs that end up on the podcast. My friend Philip Spear, James Roberts going to be on. Hopefully Michael Foychek, founder of Olame, Michelin star winner. But, food is love for me. And I know what it's like to not be able to taste it and to experience and enjoy. So that's why I love food so much.
I think that's why I wanted to end with the taco story, because the whole point is it's not lost on you because of what you've been through. And I think that translates to everything in your life. Yeah. So the takeaway that the rest of us can get from this is maybe tune in and walk away each time with a little bit more of an appreciation as you remind people of these things that so many go through.
That's it.
It's like, stop taking it for granted.
No, cherish every moment.
Cool. Yep. Well, I'm going to wrap this up. Yep. And I won't do the rapid fire. They'll save that. That's your own unique thing. You can do that with your guests. But I hope people will tune in to this show. I'm super optimistic about it. And this is going to be really fun. So,
well, thank you for being a part of it, JB.
Of course,
it's a
you don't say no to Mike Thompson.
Having JB Hager, the legend, the media icon from Austin, is a huge privilege, and that's not lost on me. I've got a great team behind me, a lot of people that have invested a lot, but having you at the helm is an honor. For those of you tuning in right now, Finding Good Podcast launches on January the 9th. We're going to have tons of conversations with remarkable people, exploring the 3 tenets of being positively selfish, surrounding yourself with good people, and more than anything, leave the world better than you found it. My name is Mike Thompson. This is Finding Good. We'll see you next time.